Welcome to another episode of Conversations Over Coffee. And today a big thank you to our friends down at Common Folk Coffee in Melbourne for the coffee mug. Really appreciate that. But it's just great to have you all joining us as we sort of press into some things that we think might be helpful for you today. You know, every so often I sit back and I reflect. I guess I just take a moment to think about what's been happening in my life so far. And sometimes I even ask the question, what would I have done differently over the last period of time? Do I have any regrets? I wonder if that's a question that you've ever asked yourself. Do you have any regrets? You know, author and poet Garrison Keller says, show me a person without regret and I'll show you a person with a memory loss. I guess what he's saying is that everybody, if you really are honest and open, there's some things that we might have done differently if we look back. Every one of us has regrets. Something we did or didn't do, something we did or didn't say, whether it's a road never taken or one that was taken for too long. Our if-onlys can sometimes even hound us into a defeated life because we're always living with the if-onlys. Even in the scriptures, in the Bible, there were people who really did start their life well, but then moved into a time where they started to regret things, but they held on to that regret. We think about King David. After he'd stuffed up a few times, his world started to crash around him. And in Psalm chapter 38 and verse 4, we read King David crying out to God, and he says, "My guilt overwhelms me. It's a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and stink because of my foolish sins. My days are filled with grief. My groans come from an anguished heart." Man, he's in a place of regret right there, and it's probably not really a healthy place to stay. Maybe for you, your regrets might be a little different to David's. Maybe they're regrets around education. Maybe it's an education that you did or you didn't get or that you didn't use. Maybe it's a regret over a career choice or an impulsive action or a time that you didn't act, or maybe your regrets around your parenting. You know, maybe you feel on reflection you spoilt your kids too much or you didn't spend enough time with the kids. Maybe you wish you'd waited longer to have kids, or maybe you wanted to have kids early, or maybe you wish you had someone else's kids. I don't know what it might be, but perhaps there's a regret there. Maybe it's in relationships. Maybe your marriage, the choices you made. You wish maybe you'd spoken to your dad more before he passed away. Maybe they're words that you've said that you regret, or words that you didn't say. Financial decisions you've made over time, you look back on and say, I would have done that differently. Or risks that you never took. You know, some of these regrets may be little minor flesh wounds if we think about it, but others may have left major scars in our life. If I think back over 30 years ago, there's certainly some decisions I made around a business that I entered into that I regret to this day. I think back and think I would have done it differently. The failure of that business and the repercussions on our young family, and even the way I look at finances now because of those decisions. I would have done things differently. And I think if we're all honest, there's some times where we'd look back and reflect and say, yeah. But we've got to be very careful we don't allow those to come into places where we start to live a life of a what if or an if only. And if we have got to that place of living a life just always thinking about the past and what if and if only, how do we overcome those? And today I want to just really quickly give you 3 ways that we can overcome the if-onlys, overcome the regrets. We can move forward. And the first one, simply press on. Get past the past. Move past the past. The Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 3 and verse 13 talked about this, about the whole idea of moving on. He said, I focus on one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. You see, we need to say, okay, the past has happened. What do I learn from the past? But then let's move forward into the future. Don't live in the what ifs and the if onlys. Don't stay there. Ask the question and move forward. The journey towards the future means that we need to get beyond our regrets and acknowledge that they're in the past. Author and humorist Will Rogers says, don't let yesterday use up too much of your today. I think that's really, really good. That's wise words. Reflect on them, but move forward. Regrets, if we stay there, can open the door for guilt to enter in, and then we stay in a place of guilt. The Apostle Paul writes in Philippians chapter 4, he says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything excellent or is praiseworthy, think about these things. You see, those of us who stare at the past for too long need to realise we've got our backs turned on the future. We can't change the past. It's time to move on. It's time to move forward. And I've shared a little bit about this in the past. If we think about one of Jesus' mates, probably his closest disciple, Peter. Remember when Peter denied Jesus 3 times when Jesus was captured? And Peter goes back to his old life and he's fishing and he's living in the failures of denying Jesus, and it's looming heavily over him and he's feeling terrible and he doesn't know what life really is going to look like moving forward. And then after Jesus' resurrection, he sees Jesus and recognizes who it is and he jumps into the water and runs to him. Imagine that first moment when Peter first sets eyes on Jesus and Jesus first sets eyes on Peter after the resurrection. Peter would be worried about the regrets of what he'd done. And the first thing that Jesus says to Peter is he says, "Do you love me?" See, Jesus has moved past the past and moves into the present and the future, and he's calling Peter to do the same. Do you love me? Let's forget about what's been and let's step into where we are today. Do you love me, Peter? I love that. I love that Peter's story is so real and it's so personal. And Peter is me and Peter is you, that we can live in our past and we can miss the present with our people around us, with our family, with our friends, and with Jesus, because we live in the past. It's time to move past the past. Secondly, another way that we can overcome the if onlys is we need to stop the blame game. You know, human beings, ever since the beginning of time, have been all about not taking responsibility but blaming others. Think about it. Ever since Adam blamed Eve and Eve blamed the serpent, we've learnt this trick of finding excuses and shifting blame. Apostle Paul said, God chose us before creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. Blameless. He doesn't want us to be of blame or blaming. Writer Byron Langerfield says, rare is the person who can weigh the faults of others without putting his own thumb on the scales. It's true. We can be looking at the faults of others, but the blame comes, and we need to recognise that we sometimes have blame ourselves, and we need to be understanding and recognising that as well. See, when we always blame others, we never take responsibility. And when we keep blaming ourselves, we can wallow in that place of feeling of regret and guilt. We've got to stop the blame game and again move forward. In a business that I was talking about before that went under, I could have continued to live my life in blame, blaming myself, blaming my business partner, blaming the financial situation of the world at that time, the recession that Paul Keating said we had to have. I could be blaming all those things. Why didn't I do more in checking out about the business? Why this? Why that? Good questions to ask initially, but then stop blaming myself and stop blaming others and move forward. We've got to drop the blame game. And thirdly, we've got to cut out comparisons. If we want to move on from the what ifs, stop comparing yourself to others. Woody Allen said one day, he said, one regret in my life is that I am not someone else. What a sad life, to wish that he was someone else. You see, comparisons can amplify regret. You know, I wish I could be like so-and-so. Why can't I look like her? Why can't I speak like him? Why can't I have money like them? Why can't I live like... You don't want that because you don't want their life because you're not them. Scriptures say no one in all of this world is innocent. Everyone's done wrong. You don't know their lives. You don't know the stuff they're dealing with. So stop comparing. If onlys, if they move into comparison, just stop them and recognize that when you try and compare yourself to someone else, you're not truly being who you are. Don't compare. God doesn't want you to be someone else. He wants you to be you. No one can be as good as being you than you. Does that make sense? We've got to be real about who we are. And finally, regrets are eased. What ifs are eased. If onlys are eased when we go to the person that's wronged us and we apologise. If we have regrets around a broken relationship, one of the best ways that we can get beyond those regrets is simply say the words, I'm sorry. Romans chapter 12 and verse 18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with all people. How do you get past regrets? Well, if you know there's been a breakdown between you and someone, go to them. The Bible says, go to them and reconcile. And sometimes you might see reconciliation in relationship. Simply the words "I'm sorry" can change your regret and help you to look forward. I've seen broken relationships restored simply by two people coming together and one starting by saying "I'm sorry." So, how do we let regrets go? Decide to move past the past. Stop blaming others. Cut out the comparisons and always be willing to apologise. Hey team, it's time to step out of regret and step into freedom. Have a great week and God bless.